Welcome back. Now, South Africa is known for having a poor savings culture worsened by high levels of household debt. The most recent Old Mutual Savings and Investment Monitor indicates that 4 in 10 working South Africans are putting money away for a rainy day, while 45% have had to dip into savings to make ends meet. But while you may not be a millionaire, Momentum Group Foundation stresses that you can save like one. Salem, Nyati, Consumer Financial Education Specialist at Momentum Group Foundation, and John Manyike, Head of Financial Education at Old Mutual, joins us for greater perspective on South Africa's saving culture. Salem, John, thanks so much for coming into studio this afternoon. And Salem, let's start with you, right? Whenever we talk about South Africa's saving culture, there's always negative connotations behind it. As I mentioned at the top, that, we're regarded one of the worst when it comes to saving in the world. And I guess let's start there. Let's start by mapping out what the savings culture looks like in South Africa, just the state of it.
Yeah, look, it is a dire state, if I can put it that way, because South Africans, the way we think about money, we think about consumption, right? And I'd like for us to look at money differently. So when you're holding money, look at it as both a fruit, but also a seed, right? You don't consume the fruit and the seed. You need to understand that the purpose of money is for you to consume some, but also plant some for tomorrow. So that's why we don't take advantage of what's available out there for us as South Africans, because we see money as something to just consume. And when you eat the seed, there's nothing for tomorrow.
Left. Yeah, and let's get your take on that then, John. We talk about a savings culture, but we have households that are living below the poverty line. How do we then encourage, someone that's struggling to make ends meet to save the little that they have?
Yeah, so look, firstly, South African savings levels are at their lowest. I think this is according to the Gibbs Savings Index. I think since 2022, 2010, they have been at its lowest. And if you also consider the fact that over the past 8 years, the savings levels have actually been declining. But if you really look at it realistically, there are a number of forces at play here. So one, we have to look at the economic conditions that we find ourselves in. The reality is that for people to save and invest, two things are involved. So you must have the willingness to save, and you must have the ability to save.
Yes.
So with the economy not creating enough jobs, it makes it difficult. And the rising cost of living, forcing people to rely on credit for daily living expenses. These are some of the challenges that are making it difficult for a lot of South Africans to get into the culture of savings.
And you look at, the levels of which households or consumers are taking up those short-term personal loans to just make ends meet and, get through the whole month. It's, quite shocking. Just talking about, the local consumer, we've had some tailwinds coming through for the local consumer. I mean, we've had lower inflation levels, interest rates have been cut as well. Has that not started showing in some of the savings levels?
Look, it takes time to filter down to a level where consumer can actually feel the difference. Remember, even if we're talking about low inflation, but one thing that we need to educate people about is that inflation number is an average number, but each and every person has a personal inflation.
Yeah.
Your inflation is not the same as my inflation because your basket may be different from mine.
Yes.
Somebody has a medical aid, the other one doesn't have, but the medical aid inflation has gone up, but it hasn't really impacted you the same way. So there's a reality of people struggling to make ends meet because we are at different levels financially speaking. So these are some of the challenges for many people, that as much as inflation might have gone down, but again, you still have an issue with people relying on debt. But one interesting thing that I must add, we've seen people, getting excited about the two pots system, and people are now starting to withdraw, from their savings pot. But when you look at what has happened in the economy from the time that people could access their savings, we've not seen growth in retail sales. So what are people buying? Because we should have had a ShopRite or Pick and Pay saying, well, we're seeing growth and people are buying more because now they've got this savings pot. We're not seeing that. We're not hearing banks saying, well, our delinquent book is improving, so people are not paying credit. Where is the money going? I have a suspicion that some of that money is finding its way in the informal sector, and this could be your mafisionisas. That's my theory.
Yes. And then it also just speaks to then South Africa's spending culture then, Salem. Here we are with, the money in the economy, but we're not seeing where it's going. What does that say about, the South African consumer and how indebted they are?
Yeah. Look, when you find yourself in a situation where you go the formal route to go and borrow, but then you find that you're being declined because of a bad credit record. Because what we do as South Africans, firstly, we don't understand the three basic things of a good credit record: paying on time, paying the full amount, and paying each and every month until you complete that credit agreement. So when we miss these three things, we then don't realize that our credit scores start to drop. We become then delinquent, so to speak, sometimes to a point of being blacklisted, but we still need the money. So what do you then do? You fall for the adverts that say, no credit checks. We'll give you money in 48 hours or 2 hours, no credit checks needed, no affordability assessments done. We fall for those things. We even go as far as falling for traps like pay an upfront fee, so scams even. And to John's point, where we don't see it in the formal settings, but there is money that is being borrowed and passed around, and that's why and how we land in that situation.
Yeah, it's quite a tricky situation, hey? And now I want us to go back to just cultivating a culture where South Africans save more. It seems like we seem to do better when we're in group settings. I think of social media challenges where one time we had the 1 Rand challenge, one time we had the 10-cent challenge. Is it more of a community thing? Should we start, gathering our friends and all just start saving together?
Look at how well stokvels do, right? Stokvels do well because there is firstly that sense of community. There's also that sense of accountability.
Yeah.
So people when you do something for yourself, you can always cheat yourself. Nobody knows. You're not accountable to anyone. But if it's myself, John, you're going to expect that money when it's your turn. So accountability then plays a role, and that's where we see. So the savings is there. Maybe it's the way we need to do it, and also the why we need to do. What's your goal? Name that savings, because sometimes we save to spend.
Yes.
We save to consume. We don't necessarily save to grow. We want to get to a point where we save to grow, because saving alone is not going to get us to that place called there, where your money has grown, where you see your tomorrow and you see that I actually left something for my children that can actually grow. So we need to move from our spray and pray approach as consumers to actually understanding why we're doing it and the accountability that also helps us.
Quite important, because I just mentioned at the top that the Old Mutual's savings report from last year did mention that 45% of South Africans have had to dip into their savings to make ends meet. So the why, very important. John, before we wrap up, just parting words, tips and tricks when it comes to saving?
Look, I think it's important that, we have a different mindset when it comes to saving. The thing is, when you decide to save, you need to have an emotional relationship with your savings goals and investment goals. If you save and you don't have a personal attachment, it's difficult to sustain your savings because there's nothing that motivates you. The reason why stokvels work better is because of the camaraderie. People are encouraging one another. You are social beings, and we're encouraging one another, as opposed to a transactional relationship between a financial institution where it's just transactional. We will send you a letter when you've missed your premium. But here, you're being encouraged and they're finding ways to work with another. So for me, have a personal relationship with your goals. That personal relationship could be I'm saving for my child, or
Yeah.
I want to improve my life in terms of becoming an entrepreneur, I'm saving for a business, whatever the case may be.
All right, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. We could talk forever, but we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much for coming into studio. That was Salem Nyati, Consumer Financial Education Specialist at Momentum Group Foundation, and John Manyike, Head of Financial Education at Old Mutual.